My name is Will Donley, and my story is called Think Twice. Legend has it that Panama means abundance of fish, and it was certainly holding true for us. It was July in the summer of 1968, and I was out for 5 days of fishing and skin diving with 7 other high school boys and a 21-year-old college junior home for summer vacation. The weather had been perfect, with clear skies and temperatures in the 80s and 90s, and our catch had been great. Red snapper, grouper, sea bass, black and yellowfin tuna, skipjack, mahi-mahi, wahoo, and a dozen Pacific lobster. I would be starting my junior year at Balboa High School in the Panama Canal Zone in the fall. My family had moved to the zone in 1955. My father was a civilian employee for the Department of Defense, and the zone became our home for the next 15 years. With 2 oceans, dozens of freshwater lakes, and the many rivers that fed into the canal, swimming and boating were always part of my life. I had my boat license for craft up to 60 feet before I got my driver's license. I joined a Sea Scout group my sophomore year in high school and became part of about a dozen boys who maintained and had the use of a U.S. Army, World War II era, 50-foot wooden J-boat, powered by a Gray Marine 671 diesel engine. We were sponsored by an Army maintenance battalion that provided us with paint, diesel fuel, and occasional mechanical help for the engine. But beyond that, we kept the boat in running condition, scraping and painting, caulking and cleaning, but mostly taking it out to fish and skin dive in the waters of the Pacific. Even though several of us had licenses, we were required to have someone over 21 with us. A good idea, as teenage boys are not always given to stop and think before doing. During the school year, we would go out a couple of weekends a month for day trips, but during school breaks and summer, we would go out for trips as long as a week. Our regular destination for longer trips was the Perlas Islands, located about 40 miles from the entrance to the canal. We would put out trolling lines as we were moving and skin dive around the coral heads surrounding the islands during the day. The tropical waters were perfect for diving, with visibility usually over 60 feet and water temperatures in the 80s. The coral heads were beautiful and the sea life abundant. At night, we would drop anchor in one of the larger coves, but our favorite spot was Conadora Island with its wide beach. After a simple dinner of hot dogs or spaghetti, we would tell stories and jokes until going to sleep. But we would also set out lines of about 150 feet of polyethylene or ski tow rope with a 480-pound steel cable leader and a 10-aught gauge hook, which is about 6 inches long. We would bait the hook with half of a 20-pound black tuna and put it on the bottom. We'd take the extra rope and put it in a bucket and wrap the extra rope around a couple of soda bottles that would rattle if something took the bait. During my 2 years on the boat, we had caught grouper, barracuda, and a sawfish. It was our 3rd night out when the bottles wrapped around my line started rattling. The line went out a couple of times and then stopped, but the 3rd time it just kept going. I grabbed the rope and pulled just as hard as I could to set the hook, and then it was off. Whatever it was, it took all 150 feet of my rope and stopped only when it got to the end that was fortunately tied to a cleat on the stern of the boat. Over the next 40 minutes, I worked pulling in, trying to get it closer. I'd bring in 20 or 30 feet and then lose that much or more. Finally, I got it close enough to the back of the boat that we could see what I had hooked. It was a 7-foot white-tip shark. It took another 10 minutes to get it in close enough to hit with a 12-gauge shotgun power head, and then we got a rope around its tail and hung it in the water from the stern and went back to bed. In the morning, we got up used a small dinghy to pull the shark into the beach, and then we dragged it up past the tide mark. Our plan was to get the hook out and cut out blocks of fillets to take home. My plan was also to get the jaws, to clean and dry and then sell to tourists who came through the canal on the cruise ships. There were 4 of us, and one of my friends straddled the shark, reached down, grabbed it by the nose, and pulled it up, opening the jaws. The other 3 of us were grouped around the mouth, and since it was my hook, I was down on my knees in the sand. I was glad to see the hook was only about 10 inches behind the jaws, close enough to get out fairly easily. I was getting ready to put my arm in to retrieve the hook when the bottom part of the jaw snapped up and locked. To this day, I don't know how I did it, but in less than a second, I was sprawled in the sand about 10 feet away, as were my 3 friends. It was like an explosion had blasted us back in a rough circle away from the shark's mouth. We were all quiet for about 10 seconds, and then being high school boys, we started laughing. Eventually we got up and we got the fillets and the jaws, but I got my hook out coming from the other direction. We talked that night about what we would have done if my arm had been in the shark's mouth when it snapped closed. But we didn't come up with any good options. I kept fishing and skin diving until I graduated from high school and returned to the United States to go to college. But I think of that morning occasionally, especially when I'm getting ready to do something a little risky or dumb, and then I think twice. Thank you.